Welcome, everybody. Just doing my usual Friday night show. Wanted to greet everybody. I'll just give everybody a little time to get in here. Yeah, just my usual Friday deal at 7. Uh, Welcome. The thumbnail I picked, I decided to pick a column of People's Armed Police armor personnel carriers of the WZ-551 variety, the wheeled type, as those are commonly used by the PAP element of the CHICOM forces. Here we go. We got somebody. First one, let's see. Welcome. Who's there? Who's there? Who's all there? Say something. Somebody say something. Welcome. Welcome. It's good to see everybody coming in here. Whoever's all in here. Hey, Wild Animus, what's going on? Yeah, man, I love your avatar, man. Your hey Heather, great to see you too. Your what is that? Your Fallout character. Yeah, when I used to play video games, I was never really what you would call a gamer per se, because I was never really really huge into video games. But that was one of the few that I used to play when I used to play video games. I found the whole post-apocalyptic world very alluring to me because it was an interesting type of format for a game. You know, you don't see a whole lot of games like that with all the detail and the different weapons choices and everything else. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. And, the cool thing about it, too, was that it was almost like foreshadowing for real life events of a war with China. Only China wasn't necessarily occupying the United States per se, but they totally eviscerated it with nukes. But yeah, that was an interesting game for its time. I always found that little series interesting. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to see you, Heather. Good to see you, Deb B, and good to see you, Allison, and Wild Animus, and see who else. Who else? Just greeting everybody as everybody comes in. Yeah, this is just my usual Friday thing, and I was going to talk about a few different things tonight. I was going to go into, yeah, Wild Animus, absolutely. I totally agree. Definitely. Definitely some foreshadowing, though not all of it, but some of it for sure. I think that they have those little programs like, what do you call that? Looking glass or whatever that is. And they're able to see a little bit into the future because that's a form of witchcraft. And we know that these elites are all about their witchcraft. Well, surely they know by now that their Great Reset's going to fail, and China and Russia are going to invade and wipe them out. And hey, El Romero, great to see you too, brother. Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, but they know that they're going to be wiped out because they have their little witchcraft like looking glass, and they can see into the future, and they can see that they're going to be wiped out by the Chicoms. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, baby. Great to see you. Great to see you. I hope you're doing well today. I really do. I hope you've had a beautiful day. Um, yeah, I'm sorry I didn't make it to your stream last night, baby, but I heard you took care of some business. Very good, very good. I tried to myself yesterday, and I guess some people will never grow up, but there's always going to be worms and snakes and everything else out there. So, posing is something that they're not. But that's all right. That's all good. That's all part of life. Sometimes you have to just face it head on and take care of business. But yeah, great to see everybody, all the true blue people. Hey, Lady M. Hey, All Smiles. It's great to see you too, All Smiles. I'm glad you're here. Um, yeah, Yeah, I'm sorry, baby. I didn't make it last night. But yeah, tonight I'm going to talk about the more about China and their plans, as I usually do. But I'm also going to talk about the woke military because I'm finding out even more about it all the time, about things that are going on. And last night, of course, I caught the policy letter that was released about the woke military bathroom policies. That they released the policy letter. The policy letter actually wasn't officially released in any sort of official capacity. It was leaked, but it's a real policy letter nonetheless. And it is going into the woke military bathroom policies. And it's pretty disgusting because, oh, hey, Debbie, yeah, I'm ex-army. I'm a combat veteran of the Iraq War, and I was injured 2 different times in Iraq by running over anti-tank mines in our MRAPs. The first MRAP was a total loss. It was totally, burned up. I mean, we ran over triple stacked anti-tank mines with a white phosphorus mortar on top, which lit the entire engine block aflame. And as I was unconscious, sitting where I had just been standing, on the gunner stand for the vehicle, because I had just unloaded my entire 200 rounds of my M249 on a town, on a home at the end of the road, and on the road itself, just in case there were more mines in the road. Yeah, I did what I could do, and then we rolled backwards just, several feet. It wasn't very far at all when we hit those triple stack mines, and the because it had to have been more than more than a double stack. It had to at least have been triple stacked because of the damage it did. It blew the whole engine block off and into pieces. It was not ever able to be recovered. The vehicle was recovered because when we were medevaced out by another company who came in with their MRAPs and picked us up, we were behind a sand berm taking cover, just in case, because we had lost all 4 of our vehicles by that point. Just in case there were still enemies alive in the town that could have opened fire on us after I had just sprayed the town with machine gun fire. But fortunately, I guess I got them. I mean, we never took any more fire. Either that I did kill some people, but it took me forever to even be able to talk about this. But there's a lot more that I'll probably never talk about. I go see providers, and of course, I talk about some of my stuff, my experiences with them, and sometimes it's good to just let it out. But that was one combat experience out of a few I've had. And I did manage to hit a few people, but the rest I think were taken out by rocket pods from Apaches that came in later after we were evacuated, like I told you all in the other stream. So, yeah, I took mines for this country, but it really wasn't for this country. It was for to line the pockets of these satanic Western elite banking cartels that sent us there in the first place. It does a whole mind F on you when you realize, you know what I'm saying by that. It does a mind F on you when you realize that you were used and, cast aside. But fortunately for me, I at least, I'm retired now, so that's fortunate. I'm not complaining about that, but I'm just saying that when you understand the realities of the world, it changes everything. It changes everything. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot with that that I think about on a daily basis. I often go back in my mind to those times, and that in a way, it helps me to be able to do the types of work I do on this channel, insofar as trying to prepare people for the realities and the horrors of warfare as it will descend upon this land. And it's a guarantee at this point. And, there's a lot of prophecy. It's in the book of Jeremiah about how there will be an internal conflict and then a foreign invasion. Because I've read you guys Jeremiah 50 and 51, where it even goes into detail about how there will be an internal conflict. And I've already covered that. And it even says that we will be invaded from all sides, inside and outside, by foreigners from another land with a different language. with a strange language, and they will descend upon the land, pillage it, loot it. They'll occupy it, and they'll make it desolate after a war of occupation. That's all in Jeremiah 50 and 51. All I did was relate it to modern terminology and modern times. So yes, I'm going to talk about the woke military tonight and compare it to the way it used to be to how it is now. And tomorrow, let's see, today is the 8th. I don't do the whole birthday thing. I don't give a damn about it, but I just look at it merely as just another year marker. I mean, it's like mileage on a car. You made it another year, So tomorrow I make it another year on this earth, which is good. I'm getting older and older, but I mean, I'm glad I'm still here because I sure didn't have to be. I sure didn't have to be. I've had a lot of close calls in Iraq, and I've even had a lot of close calls right here at home in my past. So, and I've had a lot of varied life experiences that taught me a lot of different things about various aspects of life in general, but also taught me about different types of things, such as criminal elements, such as and how they do things, such as armies and how they do things, wars and how wars progress, and more and more. I've learned about all those things through life experience, and I've learned about a lot more through studies, such as my studies on foreign militaries and their capabilities and their equipment and everything that they have, and how it all relates, coupled with experience, coupled with everything else, and how it all blends together and meshes together into a single, hypothetical when I make these hypothetical scenarios and stories that I hope people are learning from. And it's not even a bad idea for people to even go back through those time to time. Being that I'm a documentary enthusiast and I always loved History Channel documentaries because I'm that much of a nerd, I even listened to my full length internal conflict documentary playlist, which is all the videos meshed together. I listened to it the whole way through, and I was actually really satisfied with myself. I was like, I mean, not that I wasn't with my invasion documentary, but I think I did some things even better in the internal conflict documentary that I didn't do maybe as good in my invasion one. The content in the invasion one was amazing, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about the way the internal conflict one was presented. I really, really liked how it turned out. Blending a story together with actual battle maps, with different economic aspects and atrocities, just all of it blended so well. And I was really satisfied with it. And I hope other people are too. I hope people have learned something from that and the invasion materials. But, without further ado, I'm going to start talking about this, the woke military and all the detriments that we face. It's detrimental to our existence that we now have this force that cannot protect us from the Red Chinese or the Russians or any of their allies. I saw the memorandum on the new woke bathroom policies. That has to be demoralizing to our armed forces. It has to be. If there's any still good people left that held their tongues, that haven't been purged yet, that has to be like the icing on the cake for them. It's got to be embarrassing to even be associated with such an organization. Yeah, hey, thanks everybody, but I don't celebrate it. I look at it more as like a mile marker. It's that's all it is to me. It's just good to be able to make it another year, and I never really do anything for it. I just sort of just lay around the house, do my usual study and, read things, or maybe I might, do a live and just BS with people, just whatever. I don't have no like party or anything like that. I just sort of chill out. But yeah, I wanted to say that these The memorandum, as far as like what it is doing now for our armed forces, is what it's doing to them. Rather, it's making it to where people that identify as whatever they want to identify as can use the bathrooms of the opposite gender, and that's going to set things up for a lot of different issues in the future. There's going to be a lot of legal issues and ethical issues that are going to clog the courts. There's probably going to be a lot of crimes committed, as far as like R to the ape and things like that. It's going to be really, really bad for this armed forces. It was already bad enough when they tried to integrate women into combat units, because look, they already had women and men together in support units, but those are support units. They're not combat frontline fighting units. And as far as that goes, like say you have women in an artillery unit and you're out at a firing point. It's a bunch of men in a field howitzer firing cannons, but if you put a woman in the midst of that, that's just a setup for some really, really bad things to occur. Because men can be dirty, man, and you have women in the midst of that. You're gonna have jealousies. You're gonna have like little love triangles develop. You're gonna have all kinds of things that divert attention away from the mission. And they've already proven, as according to that one guy, what's his name? Uh, what's that one guy's name? Oh, Black Scout Survival. That's who it is. He's the one that got the leaked memo. According to him, and I believe it too. When they tested out integrating women into combat units, they were always defeated by all male units without exception. Without exception. They never had the performance that like an all male combat unit would have, because I mean, men are built for that shit. Let's be real about it. Let's be real. Let's not pretend that you know all this equality stuff really has any merit, because it doesn't. Because women's bodies are for childbearing, and the male body is for protecting his family. But when you equate that to a combat situation, you have men fighting because they're already built for that. They're built for fighting. Women are not really built for fighting. I mean, let's be real about it. I'm not saying that they can't. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that, you take your average woman and you take your average man, and you have them fighting each other. You're not going to have like foreign Chinese troops, against an American woman. You're not going to have them going easy on her just because she's a woman. No, they're going to see her as an enemy, and she may not be able to perform in battle like a man could. And those Chi-Coms, like say if they capture her, what do you think they're going to do to her? I mean, really, what do you think they're going to do? You think that they're going to go easy? I mean, the Chinese are savage against what they do to their enemy prisoners of war. I mean, they've shown this. They've shown it time and time again, especially in Xinjiang when they capture EPWs of the Wei to the Ger varieties. They're also doing something in Xinjiang where when they send a man away from a family and they send him to a concentration camp, what they do is they take an ethnic Chinese and put an ethnic Chinese man in the house with the wife of the imprisoned Wei to the Ger, and they're trying to do that as a form of genocide, to where that they're going to set it up to where they can breed out the whole Wei to the Ger race in China. Because you have to understand, yes, there are restive minority groups in China, but they're restive for a good reason, because they're being oppressed and they're being genocided in a soft genocide. It is a soft genocide. So, yes, it's men. Men are made for combat. Yes, Heather. It's biblical that men, are the combatants, not women, because back in Bible times when you had Joshua leading his army against, the the Amalekites, the Canaanites, and all of the ites that lived in ancient Israel when they came out of Egypt. You had Joshua leading his armies, and they were men. They weren't women. And even in the time of Yeshua, when there were rebellions against the Roman Empire, it was all the men. It was the Hebrew men. It wasn't it wasn't the women. The Hebrew men didn't even allow women into their camps because they had certain purification rituals where they had to be pure to communicate with God, and that was more of like a sexual type of thing where they had to be clean. I mean, it's not that they couldn't sleep with their wives. It was that they couldn't sleep with their wives and communicate with God right thereafter. They had to bathe, and they didn't have access to tubs or bathing out in their camp in the wilderness. Roy Potter does a good job explaining the actual literal history of it. I mean, I don't necessarily fully agree with Roy Potter's theology, but Roy Potter as a historian, wow, wow. That guy knows a lot about ancient Israel. A lot, a lot. If you're going to him for the history, what you do is you chew up the meat, but you spit out the bones, like my friend Ken Weathered at the Weathered channel used to always say. He says, when you look at certain things, you chew up the meat and you spit out the bones. So, although I do agree with Roy Potter about 98% of the time, that 2% I don't agree with, is maybe some theological things. But, when you listen to anybody, of course, you're never going to always agree with everybody you listen to, but you want to tend to listen to those who are correct in the 90 percentile. So if you're listening to somebody, you want to go with those who you agree with in the 90th percentile. So it's like 90% and above of their material you agree with. And it has to be truthful. So it's, Roy Potter's historical analysis is incredible. It's amazing. But yeah, some of the theological things, no, I just disregard it because I don't agree with it fully. But he's a good guy. I mean, he's genuinely a good man. He just has his own beliefs and convictions. But you know what? He may change. He may change, and he may realize that Yeshua is the Messiah, and I mean that completely. He might already believe that, but he doesn't. He never confesses it really. He talks about Yeshua, but he doesn't really talk about it in the same way that others do, at least that I've heard. So I'm not going to knock him for anything. I'm not knocking him at all. This isn't a knocking thing. I actually have a lot of respect for him, and I think he's a really good person. He's up there doing the best he can, and he's speaking truth about the history of ancient Israel, and I have a lot of respect for that. I think he's great. But yeah, and he was a colonel. He's a colonel in the army. He's retired, of course. But he used to be a colonel in the army, like way back when. So I followed him for a long time. He's a good dude. He's a good, solid dude. But yeah, there's people you can listen to that are solid, and people that you can't, that aren't so much, and you know them by their fruits. You know all by their fruits. And you all know what I mean by that. But anyways, you have things like the woke policies with like the whole bathroom thing. That's opening the door to even more hanky-panky and other types of situations, which will divert the woke military from its mission of defending the country. So the military is utterly just complete garbage right now. I mean, we all know it. We all know it has been, but they're making it worse and worse and worse by the day. And again, the thumbnail that I picked was the People's Armed Police Paramilitary of China. That's a column of their infantry fighting vehicles without the main gun on them. They're normally equipped. The WZ-551 infantry fighting vehicle variant is equipped with a 25 millimeter cannon. It fires these gargantuan 25 millimeter rounds with exploding tips. It's the same type of gun that is used for air defense in some cases. It can be used against helicopters and such things, but it fires these gargantuan rounds that explode. But it's not. But they're not in. They're not screwed in that photo. It's sort of like how you can have the Bradleys of the American Army that don't have their 20 millimeter gun, installed. I shouldn't have said screwed in, but you know what I mean, installed. But yeah, that's the People's Armed Police are the fanatical, pro-regime, paramilitary guardians of the CCP. They're like the SS. They're like the Waffen SS of the Nazi Third Reich. Like they're like China's equivalent of that. Like the SS was a brutally fanatical paramilitary force that protected the regime of Hitler, sort of like the PAP of China are the very same, but for Xi Jinping and the CCP. They're the guardians of the CCP, and they're like a parallel military element to the regular PLA army. So that was the column of their vehicles I used as a thumbnail, because I am going to also talk about China a lot. Of course, I think I am one of the people that gives some of the most detailed information that's around as it pertains to the Chinese and their military and their capabilities and their industries and everything else that they have. So I'm going to, of course, go into that. But with the woke military's bathroom policy, they're just making it worse and worse and worse. And we already know that the physical training standards have been lowered, and they may even be doing away with a lot of the PT programs, because they're going to have to make it easy for the requirements to be able to get people to come in. While they purge our military of its best people, they replace it with people that are not so good at all in anything, in any category. They're not physically or mentally adept for the tasks that they'll be required to do. You see, when I was in the Army and in field artillery, we got used in Iraq as both infantry and artillery, as combat arms can all revert back to their infantry training and be used as such, whether you're a tank or artillery. And if you're infantry, you're just always infantry. But those are the three branches of combat arms. But that's why the sign-on bonuses for field artillery when I was in were so high, because they get two jobs for one. So, it didn't make sense to me at the time, but it made perfect sense later when I saw how we were used in Iraq. So here's the thing. When I was in the Army, I used to be able to pick up two artillery shells and put them on my shoulder. The rocket-assisted projectiles, which we called the RAP rounds, which is rocket-assisted projectiles, were artillery shells that weighed roughly about 130, 135 pounds. It was in that range. And I used to be able to put two of those on my shoulders, like one on each shoulder, and carry both of them from the field artillery supply vehicle where we kept a lot of our extra shells. I used to be able to put one on each shoulder and run it from that to the gun, to the howitzer, when we were set up at our firing positions. Now, I was on a self-propelled howitzer. A lot of people think it's a tank. It's not a tank. It's a field gun. It's a howitzer, a 155 howitzer that is encased in a chassis and a turret system. So it's, quasi-protected from bullets and such, but it's just basically Kevlar. It's not much more than that. I mean, if you were being hit by like 12.7 millimeter rounds, it would probably rip right through it and kill the crew. But it wasn't really the same type of armor as is on tanks or that is on infantry fighting vehicles, or some of the better armored personnel carriers. Of course, the old armored personnel carriers like the M113s, the armor on that's aluminum, basically. It's garbage. When they used those in Vietnam, they used to have to put sandbags on the floor to protect it from mines. Or you would see people oftentimes riding on top of those with sandbags around the top because it was so hot in Vietnam and sweltering inside of those, rolling tin cans, basically. They were like rolling beer cans because, AK rounds would go basically right through those too, more or less. They weren't very strong. They were not strong at all, which is why a lot of times in Vietnam they used sandbags. Well, in Iraq, I mean, people could modify things. Like at first with the Humvees, you saw a lot of local modifications on the forward operating bases where they would upgrade the Humvees on their own. Then they started coming out with the up armored Humvees, which came already encased in better armor. And then, I'm talking about from soft skin Humvees, which were the original kind, all the way up to the up armored variety. And then when those weren't cutting it because the enemies were starting to use bigger, badder munitions against us along the roads and everywhere else, then we got the MRAPs. And we started out our unit with Humvees on our fob, but then we went to Balad Air Force Base and traded in our Humvees for MRAPs, and just in time too, because had I been in an up armored Humvee and run over a triple stacked anti tank mine with a white phosphorus mortar on it, I'd have been barbecued, and my body would have been in a bunch of different pieces out in that desert somewhere, probably never recovered. Yeah, we all would have been cooked. We ought to have been burned alive and blown to bits inside of that up armored Humvee had it been such. But fortunately, it was an MRAP, which are designed to take mine hits with its V-shaped hull and its better armor. The hull of it is shaped in a V, so that when the explosion happens, it pushes the explosion out to two different sides. So it takes a lot of the blast power out of the surface area of the blast is diverted, so that not all of it is hitting the hull completely. It's being sort of diverted out in two different directions, which is what made it it made it take mine hits like a champ. It could take mine hits like a champ. But yes, we had those. But back when when things began to change in the army was about the time was about the time I was getting out. So what happened was it was 2012, and it was about 3 months. I was due to retire in 3 months. Okay, 3 months before I'm due to retire, they come out with this video, and we had a general. It was at the time it was McChrystal. I think McChrystal back then was like the head of the Joint Chiefs. Well, he came out with this video, right, when they repealed the don't ask and the rest. When they repealed that about 3 months before I was getting out, McChrystal on the video looked really, really like he was like ashamed of having to get up there and do that. But that's what political parasites do. They interfere in military affairs, and they want to micromanage the military when politicians they're not, generals. They don't have any experience with how armies run or work, or militaries in general, which is all the branches. They interfered, and they started to make it woke. And that was a process that started with that video in 2012, right before I retired. And looking back now, I see that that's why God got me out of the armed forces, because God didn't want me involved with an organization that was doing those sorts of things, that was beginning to change. And you know what? I'm grateful that I'm out. I'm very grateful that I'm out now. Yeah, hey, Into the Fray, great to see you. Great to see you. I hadn't seen you in a minute. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm just talking about the woke military tonight, and I'm talking about the Chinese. But here I'm describing the changes I noticed when I was getting out of the army, essentially, Into the Fray. I was saying that when I was getting out, that they were beginning to start to wokeify it. They were starting to change the armed forces into the woke military, and it was a process that was gradual. But it appears that oh, I'm glad you're doing good, Into the Fray. I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah, what's wrong, All Smiles? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought something was wrong. Oh, I'm glad you're all right. I'm glad everybody's here is all right. But yeah, when I was starting to get out of the military, it was starting to turn woke, and I got out at just the best time. Oh, I'm sorry, All Smiles. I'll do that. I'll do that. I hope you feel better. I really do. I really do. Yeah, I'll do that for you. Um, Yeah, I was getting out, and they started to wokeify it with General McChrystal's video of him saying that they repealed that certain thing, and there was the little rainbow on the White House and all that other garbage. Well, when I got out, that was already starting to take its course, and then about I want to say it was 2020 when things really started to go bad, and we had already been eclipsed by China by that point for at least a few years, because about 2017, 2018 time frame was when we began. Oh, hey, Aaron, I'm glad you made it. Yeah, welcome, welcome. Great to see you too. Yeah, Heather, Babylon. Yep. Um, yeah, I noticed that, when the Chinese started to begin to, beat our ass in every single solitary war game that began around the 2017, 2018 timeframe. Well, those supercomputers at the Pentagon figure in a lot of different factors. So when I would research China, I started to unearth a lot of those factors. One factor being that China would dominate us in the air due to the sheer number and volume of combat aircraft they have. They have the largest combat air fleet in the world. Maybe not the largest overall air force, but it's the largest combat air fleet, if that makes sense. Meaning that out of all their planes, the number of combat planes they have far surpasses the amount of support planes, whereas we have this humongous air mobility command, as it's called, which is all the transport aircraft like the C-17 Globemasters, the C-130 Hercules, and all those other planes. We have a lot of AWACS, and we have like submarine hunters, and the Navy has those too. We have a lot of different aircraft, but China has a lot of combat aircraft. They're very combat aircraft heavy. Like, they have a lot of aircraft that are designed to, in the combat role, and that includes their strategic bomber fleet. That includes their tactical fighter bombers, which are like localized bombers made to hit like individual targets, either by strafing or by dropping munitions on them or by firing air to ground missiles. That's what tactical fighter bombers do. And then you have fighters, which are strictly for like the air defense role, which is, to dominate in the air and shoot down your enemy's aircrafts, be they other fighters, be they their tactical fighter bombers, or be they their strategic bombers. China has vastly more combat aircraft than we have. They have the second biggest overall strategic bomber fleet, with some 242 bombers. The vast majority are the H-6K bombers, which can carry a humongous payload. Then there's the newer H-20 strategic bomber, which actually doesn't look anything like ours does. Our B-2s, China has developed their own, and it looks completely different. If you looked at that picture I posted of it with the two with their two stealth fighters, those two J-20 stealth fighters escorting it, that's their newest their newest H-20 strategic bomber. It's a stealth bomber. It's only the only relevance it has to the B-2 Spirit bomber that we have is that it's also a stealth bomber in a similar tongue twisting, a similar category. And it is there to sneak in under radar, drop its payload, and sneak on back out. That's its mission, just like our B-2 is designed to do that. Well, China has now two different stealth fighters. They have their their infamous indigenously designed J-20 that they've already mass produced into the 200s range. They have their newest one, which is their J-31, which is like a miniaturized version of the F-22. It's actually more like the F-22 than it is like the F-35. It's like they reverse engineered the F-22, miniaturized it, and very slightly miniaturized it, and they intend for it to be a carrier aircraft for their aircraft carriers, like for the new super carrier they launched. The next one that's due to be complete here very soon. It's just waiting on computer installations and radar, electronic warfare systems, things like that. They're due to release those J-31s to be a naval stealth fighter. And it's a multi-rolled stealth fighter, so it can attack like surface ships or ground targets if it's coming from the sea to attack land, and they have their J-20 as their Air Force's stealth fighter that's beginning to become very mainstream as a mass-produced aircraft. They have a lot of other types of fighter aircraft too, and tactical fighter bombers. They have the JH-7 tactical fighter bomber, and they have the Q-5, which is still in service. It's actually still a pretty effective fighter bomber that's an air-to-ground aircraft. The only problem with the Q-5 is like it's a lot shorter of a range of an aircraft than the JH-7 is. The JH-7 can go a whole lot further than the Q-5, but China has an additional 300 Q-5s in storage that are there to be brought out in case they need to suddenly massively increase the size of their tactical fighter bomber fleet. They keep them maintained in storage because they're still effective aircraft. They can still get the job done as far as the ground attack role is concerned. So China would dominate us in the air, being that they have the biggest combat air fleet. Although the second biggest overall strategic bomber fleet, they have the biggest fighter and tactical fighter bomber fleet of any nation on Earth. They have the second biggest strategic bomber fleet. We have the third. Russia has the biggest strategic bomber fleet at 571, and that is their Tupolev 95s, the Bear bombers. That's their Tu-16s they keep in storage. That's their Tu-22Ms. And that's also their newest Tu-160, which is a very, very fast, it's a supersonic bomber. It's got newer computers, avionics systems, the targeting systems, radar, all of it. So that's the Russian bomber fleet. It's humongous, and that is also kept maintained in their storage along with their helicopter fleet. But back to China. China on the ground has an immense amount of ground vehicles that nobody even can touch. If you've seen all my past work, you know about the size of their tank fleet. And that's everything. That's their tank fleet for their reserves, their active, and some of their paramilitary forces that are equipped with tanks, both main battle tank and light tank varieties. And you have the immensely gargantuan size of armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles that China can bring to bear. A lot of which are also in storage, and they also have a lot of armored fighting vehicles, like their own MRAPs and everything like that. China is it's humongous. It's freakishly humongous. They're like nobody can take them. And on sea, when it comes to sea combat, China has the biggest surface and submarine fleet. They've surpassed us with subs now because they have 2 more subs than we have and counting. They're continually cranking out subs because China has their civil military fusion policy where they're actually set up to retool shipyards and even civilian plants like automotive and bus plants where they produce automobiles and buses. They can retool all of those at a moment's notice to begin cranking out military vehicles and ships. It's not hard for them to do because they've set themselves up for that. While we, on the other hand, we have stripped all our old factories of their machinery. They've been sitting there with caved-in roofs and walls collapsing and all the typical scenery you can imagine when you think of an old ruined factory. That's what we've allowed to happen to us. There's no way we can bring those back online. And to build new factories, brand new factories, would take a lot of time to get the machinery, the tools, the precision tools, everything you need, and the experts, everything you need to bring a factory online. It's something that is beyond our capability to do at this point. But China, on the other hand, has built themselves up into the world superpower, while we, on the other hand, have shrunk to to the status of a regional power. And even that's now in question as we have this woke military that has depleted itself of some of its, typical weapons it would need as far as infantry forces. It's already depleting itself now of some of its heavy weapons, sending some of which overseas. And it's also depleted of its best people, which have been purged or have retired and not looked back and didn't do a reenlistment. You know what? Because I'm going to be honest with you all. When I first got out of the Army, it had me sort of depressed. I felt like I was without a purpose because I intended on the Army being my career. I mean, my God, I almost did 8 years by the time I was retired medically. I wanted to stay. I wanted to stay and do the full 20 years and then do a regular retirement. I wasn't even going to do a partial retirement, which is at 10 years. I was going to do a regular full-time retirement because I was full-time committed to that as my career. But when I was medically retired, it left me feeling like I had no more purpose at all. I had a family by this point. My first wife and I had a son. And he lives with her because she's a traveling RN, and she has a good head on her shoulders, though. She knows about this mark of the beast, and she'll never take it. So I at least know my son's in good hands with her. But I don't ever really get to see him because they're always on the road, and that's a shame, but it is what it is. I pay my child support, I take care of my business. I'm not a deadbeat dad. But then I got married a second time, and that's it is what it is. And then I got married. Maybe I'll be married a third time to my lovely Jennifer, who I love dearly. And Jennifer is a wonderful woman, great woman. Despite the recent slander and libel against her, none of it is true. What is true is she is the most beautiful woman in the world, and she is loyal, she is steadfast, she is honorable, and that's the fact of it, and I love her. But you have all of these things coalescing as far as like the woke military goes, and you have it to where you have just everything's collapsing on itself. You have the demoralization in full effect, and now when this bathroom policy becomes a mainstream thing in the woke military, you're going to probably see people leaving in droves. You're not going to see retention. Retention is already very, very bad. And you're welcome, baby. You're more than welcome. Retention is very bad already because you have this demoralized, pathetic, woke military that nobody really wants to even be a part of anymore because now they know what it's all about. I mean, the only people that want to be part of it is this new woke generation of these like Call of Duty kids and these kids that have no idea what the hell they're getting into. Because when we go up against a country like China, guess what? The people that make up the Chi-Com army, they're looking at American women online because they're looking for wives. Yeah, they're looking for wives. So all these women that have like TikTok and YouTube videos putting their little pretty faces up there and, dancing and prancing. Yeah, you got Private Hung Fat of the PLA or PAP over there in China. He's eyeballing you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's eyeballing you. Yeah, he wants you as a wife. You don't think the Chinese are doing that? Think again. Think again. So, they know that they're going to come in here and they're going to, genocide a lot of the American people when they do invade us and occupy us. They're also going to take spoils, and they're going to do it just like in ancient times, where they take the women and use them as sex slaves or toys, and they, kill off most of the men and enslave the rest. That is how they're going to treat prisoners of war. That's how they're going to treat the civilians. And that is why I'm trying to get serious people that care about real shit I'm trying to get them ready for the future because it's coming. Oh boy, it's coming. It's coming fast and hard. I don't know. I don't know exactly when, but I know it's coming. I know it's coming. And I know that we inch closer to it by the day. And people that think, oh, yeah, it is awful, Lady M. It's horrific. It's horrific. It's awful, but it's going to happen. They're going to do that. And even before that happens, if people think that these crazy, kooky, wild, different factions, if they think that they can't arise out of the shadows and create a new paradigm which will launch this nation into some sort of an internal conflict that causes it to rip itself to pieces, if people think that can't happen, yeah, think again. Yeah, if you don't think this is a very, very uh, that's a scenario. This is a very real thing that can occur because you have people in the shadows that are lurking and plotting and scheming and planning. And if people think that that's not happening, then they're very naive. In a nation of nearly 340 million within its borders, and I even include all the different illegals that come in with that number. You have a situation where no, it's not a game, baby. It's not a game at all, Jennifer. It's very real. If you think in a nation of some nearly 340 million that there's not people with their own ideas, their own goals, well, it's not really funny though, Giorgio's Cruz. It's actually it's serious, man. Like this is real shit, dude. The Chinese are going to crush us in an invasion, along with the Russians, along with their allies. They already have troops inside this country as Trojan horse shock forces. Yeah, women will learn Chinese, though, Georgios. You're right. You're right. They will, and it's not because they want to, it's because they'll be forced to, because they're going to have new husbands or they're going to have new slave masters that keep them chained up in barns or locked in dog cages or whatever. I mean, that's going to be their new lives. They're going to be, who knows? They're going to have them living in some sort of bondage BDSM servitude or whatever. I mean, it's not funny. It's serious, and it's not something that they're going to want to do. It's going to be punishment because this nation's a sinful nation that aborted its children and did other disgusting things. I mean, that's basically, it's like in my story that I wrote in the second story where that coffin-sized wooden box, that one woman got thrown into it. That lady that ran the Mexican restaurant, she got thrown into a wooden box, like a dog box, and they kept her in there, and they were going to make her a sex slave, but then she said that she knew how to cook, so they used her as a kitchen slave instead, and she didn't have to live in a box. I mean, but that's real shit. It's not a joke. I mean, women can be enslaved under those conditions. It's not a joke. I mean, this nation's a sinful nation, and it'll be punished because the Chinese are going to come in here, and they're going to take what they want, who they want, and do whatever they want with them, including the elites. The elites ain't getting away with nothing. They're going to be slaves too. I bet you, Xi Jinping on his gold and red throne, he'll probably have Klaus Schwab as a footstool, or he'll use one of the Rockefellers or Rothschilds as a footstool. He'll humiliate them worse than anybody will be humiliated. They'll be doing things, they'll be building him pagodas or temples or whatever he wants them to build because they're going to be slaves, or they'll be sewing Nikes for the rest of their short, miserable lives. Everybody's going to suffer. It's mothers, daughters, sisters, everybody. Think about what these Chi Coms will do, and your imagination will run wild. It's serious. It's very serious. Oh yeah, nobody will be exempt, Lady M. Nobody. Everybody. The Chinese, when they enslave Americans or they genocide Americans, nobody will be exempt. It'll be worse than what the Nazis did to Soviet citizens. And if you read about some of the stuff Nazis did to Soviet citizens, they literally put people in wooden boxes and sent them back to Germany on trains like they were parcels. They sent them to German families in boxes to be like literally. They sent them in like boxes that you would put like, like use as a package. They put people in wooden packaging and sent them to German families to be used as house slaves and things like that. They did that type of shit during their genocide in the Soviet Union. They also raped Soviet women and used them as whores and bordellos and things like that. If you think that stuff wouldn't come here in a foreign invasion, you're out of your damn mind. You're out of your freaking mind. This is serious, man. This is real shit. It's. Hold on, let me light my cigarette here. It's stressing me out even having to talk about it because I already know what's coming and I already know how ugly it'll be for people. It's really sad. Yeah. It's going to totally wreck the spirits and souls of people. It's going to crush people's souls. The types of things that are going to happen in this country. Yeah, Mary, I'm laying down facts. This is real. It's going to crush the spirits of people. It's going to crush their spirits and their soul when they see what happens to this country. And even before the foreign invasion, these crazy factions that are going to come out of the woodwork and try to all seize power, like I had in my documentary for the internal conflict, these different factions are all going to create a new paradigm because there's going to be no more globalist paradigms that are going to be running things. There's not going to be no left-right paradigm garbage. It's all going to be, this faction against this faction against this faction. They're all going to have their own ideologies, creating a new paradigm, and they're all going to be jockeying for power to fill that power vacuum when this country collapses in on itself economically and financially. And with the food and fuel collapse, you are absolutely going to see various warring factions arise, all with their own leaders and ideologies that have nothing to do with globalism. In fact, some of them may be even diametrically opposed to globalism, and they might make it their official end game to go after the globalists themselves. You don't know. Nobody knows who is lurking in the shadows and plotting and scheming different things. Nobody knows. Because this is a nation of some nearly 340 million people. It's very naive to think that there's not people doing the types of things that I put in my story in my first part of my documentary. That documentary shows you exactly how these things can happen, exactly how it could happen, and how easy it is. It's not hard. It's not like it's some kind of a hard task for people that know people that know people that know people to be able to cobble together their own sorts of factions with their own ideologies. All it takes is a dedicated leadership core who have their own propaganda, their own dissemination methods, their own dedicated leadership, their own everything, ham radio operators, they have ties to different other groups that can merge them into one single group. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. It's not like it's hard. I mean, my God, like some in my stories, some crazy Mormons, some religious kooks living out on a few different compounds cobbled together a brigade of some 4,000 to 5,000 dedicated militants that took over the Mormon church and the state in one fell swoop, the state of Utah. They took it over in one fell swoop, and then they expanded. It's not hard. I mean, exactly like that. That's how those things can happen. It's not hard at all. It doesn't take much. It just takes those people being dedicated to their goals and their plans and their ideologies for them to make it happen. I mean, that's what I'm saying here, is that there's so much stuff coming at us. I am trying to get people ready for it. We don't have time for little petty bullshit in this life, and definitely not in the next life, because everybody's going to answer for anything they said or did. Period. That's the end game. That's the end. That's that. In the next life, if people weren't taking this life seriously and trying to do what they could to help others in this life and taking it seriously, then they're going to answer to God for it in the next life. Because guess what? Between the internal conflict and between the collapse and the famine and everything else and the foreign invasion, lots of people are going to freaking die. Lots of people are going to die. And people walking around in good health right now, they have no idea what could happen to them in just a matter of years if that they may not even be around in some years. They might not even be around one more year. It all depends on how fast these different things occur. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. You walking around in good health, everything's all, happy and cheery one day. Well, then the next day, you know, you got Chi-Com troops coming out of every cupboard and nook and cranny and alley and building, and they're just starting to take things over. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody knows when these things are going to happen. I mean, you can have a general decent idea of when it could happen. Like, I made personal predictions that I ended up sharing with people, but they were personal. They were things I kept to myself. Maybe I should have just continued to keep them to myself, but I made those predictions based on numerical fact. It is a fact that we are running perilously low on food, clean drinking water in general, especially in the western states, and also fuel from the national from the national strategic reserve. I mean, we are running perilously low on these things, and I featured all of that prominently in my internal conflict, my Syrian style, meaning with factions and sects all going to war. In my factional Syrian-style Second American internal conflict, which is a multi-way civil conflict, I featured that prominently as a cause, or one of the causes, along with other causes like all the false flags and overreach and everything else. It all turned this place into a pressure cooker that ended up just blasting, into a full-out multi-factional, multi-way internal civil conflict that ended horribly. And that was like an appetizer for the even worse thing that was coming next, which was the foreign invasion of China, Russia, and their allies. It was like an appetizer. 35 million perished in that scenario, many to famine. There were also many that got caught up in the crossfire, but still a decent amount were the combatants themselves. 7 million different combatants from all the factions combined perished by the end of that. 35 million. So, that was just the appetizer, because what was coming after that would be even more destructive and even worse with the foreign invasion. So, with all these things coming on this sinful nation as a punishment, people better get their heads out of their asses collectively, and they better recognize that this stuff is real and it's coming at us. We don't have time for small, petty bullshit. We need to worry about the real shit that is coming at us head on. So, again, with the woke military, where does that tie into it? Well, in my docuseries, I had two different timelines. The internal conflict and the economic collapse happened in one timeline, with the foreign invasion still following it. Same patterns, same everything, only that we had an internal conflict. Now, that's a worst case for us. Now, the best case was that the invasion came during a time like this where things were relatively calm and we were able to, organize some sort of a effective, defense, as far as, turning into bands of, defensive nomadic tribals that went and lived in the woods. But that was a best case for us. Now, in a worst case, we have an internal conflict which ends a lot of people's lives, people that would have made an impact in trying to resist an occupation. Now, in my regular one, that was a best case with the invasion. But the woke military fits into it like this. In the internal conflict, it bifurcates. It totally splits into two. It splits into a part that goes with different factions, especially the Free American Army faction, sort of like the Free Syrian Army in Syria, how they were former Syrian troops. Well, there was the Free American Army, which got most of the people that defected, and then there was the NSRF, which got most of the rest, and then the Mormon State and Texas and Florida. But that was how it split apart along those lines. But then you had the remaining loyalists to the globalist regime, which were like most of your active duty forces, not all, but most. And the rest that couldn't come home were just stranded overseas, to be picked apart when the war with China and Russia began later. But imagine that, not being able to go home. You never see your home again, but you're stuck in some other part of the world, and you're just totally at the mercy because now you have no logistical support coming from home, and you run out of your supplies and everything, and you're just at the mercy of China, Russia, and their allies, just to be picked apart like that. That could happen. That absolutely could happen. So when the woke military bifurcates because of all these woke policies and demoralization and breakdown and discipline and everything else that's coming with it, yeah, you can absolutely totally have that, and you likely will. And in a foreign invasion, it'll fall apart quick. It won't be able to put up much of a resistance at all. As you saw in my stories I wrote, in those hypothetical stories, and as you saw in my hypothetical documentary invasion, where I had two of them, which go with the same series as the community tab stories I wrote did, but they offer two different views. The videos offer a macro level, like overhead view of a map, like a higher up view of the world, and the stories are like nitty gritty down at the street level, where you see the things actually happening on the ground and what it looks like on the ground. Well, the army just disintegrated in the face of the Chinese and Russian onslaught. They just totally disintegrated because of all the woke garbage and everything else. They disintegrated. They were not an effective fighting force by that point in time. They just fell apart. So, in a situation like that, you just basically have things like that occurring to where the woke armed forces falls apart, disintegrates. They're no more. They're no longer an effective fighting force anywhere on the ground. In an internal conflict, they split and become parts of different factions, along with the different militias and different, gangs and militants, whatever. They all split. And that is a result of the types of policies like they're instituting now that I brought up at the very beginning of this video. So, the woke military will be ineffective at defending this country from a foreign invasion. It'll also likewise be ineffective at being a cohesive force in any sort of internal conflict. I mean, I guess that could be both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because they're no threat really to anyone anyway. I mean, they can't occupy the whole country. I mean, they're not big enough, but it becomes a problem because you might have like some radical factions that get parts of it, and then you have some radical factions using it, and it ends up affecting the lives of other people that live in other factional areas or whatever, or even neutral, non-aligned areas, because there were plenty of neutral and non-aligned areas that didn't take any sides in the internal conflict. They just sat there and protected their communities from all factions. They didn't want to be a part of it, which is probably the smartest thing anybody could ever do. You don't want to be involved in anything like that. You do not want to be part of that. So we see all that occurring, and we see how things are going. We see how powerful China's grown with its war industries. We've seen how since the late 90s, China has grown into the world superpower, an industrial behemoth, a military behemoth. And that includes their paramilitary. All combined, they are a behemoth. They cannot be challenged by anyone on the world map. So, like I said in the other live, when it talks about the dragon giving its power to the beast, that could entail Satan giving his power to the beast every bit as much as it could China, because China is the world superpower. Doesn't that make sense? Think about it. If China is the most powerful country on the map, and that country endorses the beast, then that means that nobody can challenge the beast. No one can make war with him. Who is like unto the beast? Who can make war with him, like it says in the Bible? Well, if China is your benefactor, your backer, who can make war with you? No one. No one. China is all over the world, either officially or unofficially, because they have all their Belt and Road nations that have become their client states, either economically or militarily, and they have troops in all those countries. They are now dictating policy to those countries who defaulted on their loans and their programs for the Belt and Road. So China is in control of lots of areas of the world, and there is no doubt about it. Yeah, don't feed your dog any kind of products from that country because it will kill your animal. Same thing with like baby formula. My God, I mean, think about what that would do if the pet food is that bad. Look, they're the ones bringing all that fent, the fent, that gets smuggled in. They're the ones that create all that. And they have the MSS, which is the Chicom Intelligence Agency. They've cultivated ties with those groups who then already have the networks set up to where they can do their low-key chemical warfare against us because it's such a such a highly potent, nasty toxin. It's an opioid, but it's like an opioid that is 100 times more powerful than morphine, which makes it a toxin. It's a chemical weapon because it's a highly toxic opioid. It is a chemical weapon, and it is killing our young people in droves. So that country has been low key already conducting chemical warfare on our populations. They are low key doing it with our pet foods. They're doing it with the narcotics. They're doing it with everything that they're getting in here. They've already got their troops in here. It's insidious. It is insidious. It is an insidious way to set your enemy up for failure and to make war on them, to bring them down. And they are toppling us bit by bit by bit. And remember, there are two sets of elites. There is the Eastern elites and the Western elites. There are two totally different and diametrically opposed sets of elites. But like rival mafia syndicates, they will sit down with each other, make business deals with each other, but also plot against each other on the same token. Only the Western elites are stupid and arrogant, and they're the ones being plotted and schemed against because in their great reset, they think they're going to tear down the current world, well, not world, but rather Western systems. It doesn't affect the rest of the world because China and Russia have their own ideas. They've built themselves up while we've torn ourselves down in the West, and that includes Europe and America, Australia. The West is ripping itself apart while China and Russia are building up. It's diametrically opposed. Russia is having an economic boom right now. They are booming economically. They suffered small setbacks from their sanctions, but then once they got through that and they revalued their currency among commodities, oh, now they're experiencing a boom. It totally backfired. And the West, who was mostly dependent upon those commodities, is paying the price, literally and figuratively, for it. The whole Evergrande thing was there to hurt the West. It was weaponized by China to hurt the West. It only hurts Western investors. It's not hurting the Chinese. They are not bankrupt, and anybody that's ever said that or thinks that is a damn fool. How can China be bankrupt when they have the biggest gold deposits on Earth at 6,400 tons plus of gold? Because a lot of independent speculation has speculated that they have more, but I don't go with speculation. I go with what the facts are, and the facts is that the reported numbers that have been reported are 6,400 tons. They are the single biggest holder of gold on Earth. They are not bankrupt. That is the dumbest ass thing I've ever heard. And they also are about to do their petro yuan renminbi by dealing with that with Saudi Arabia, establishing that, setting it up. And they already have oil contracts with Iran. They put their troops in Iran to guard the oil fields of Iran, and also to, which China has, their oil companies have rigs, drilling rigs on, and their oil companies are sending back to China right now. You can look that up. China is also getting cheap oil from Russia, their main ally, and cheap iron ore, nickel, coal, everything you need to produce military equipment. China is getting the raw resources from Russia. They have stockpiled fuel and everything they need logistically. Food. China has hoarded food. I've told you all the numbers. I've read it all off in another live. China has hoarded food and fuel to prepare for their invasion of the West. China has sent troops to Serbia. I even showed you all the propaganda. I said wherever Chi-Com troops go, so does their god, Xi Jinping. and he is on a billboard in Serbia, many billboards probably, but that one I got the picture of. He is on that billboard with his picture. It's a propaganda billboard with his picture with Mandarin and Serbian writing to let the Serbs know that Xi Jinping is watching over them too. That's really eerie and creepy if you think about it. It's really creepy. Like they really look at like Xi Jinping as a cult of personality. Like he's a god in China, a little G god, because he's just a man or maybe a principality, but they look at him as a god because he rules the almighty state. And the state in a secular humanist regime like communism, fascism, Nazism, ultranationalism, all the isms are secular humanist types of regimes where the state is God, the nation state, the regime. And because Xi Jinping's at the head of it, they see him as their little G God. They worship Xi Jinping. I've shown you all repeatedly on this channel the extent of the Xi Jinping propaganda in China. He is everywhere. He is all over China. They worship him. That is a graven image of Xi Jinping. They worship him. So he is the god of China. And China has put troops in Serbia to help their ally, the Russians, to conquer NATO when the time is right. Because China and Russia will invade Europe together. Not only invade Europe together, but they will invade the United States together too. And they will crush this place. And they will rub the American people's noses in proverbial shit when they do. They will humiliate the American people. They will humiliate the elites of America. And all the things I said earlier that they're going to do to women and just people in general, yeah, they're going to do that. They will do that. So that is why I have this channel, to get people ready for that. I don't have time for little petty bullshit. This is real life shit here. So I want people to know how to defend themselves. I want people to know about tactics. I want people to know about real things that matter. Not things that don't matter. So that's why I have this channel. So I have taken the time, I've dedicated time out of my life to make hypothetical scenarios where research is compiled, delicately put together with experience that I've had in combat, in war, just in general. I've woven it all together into a single hypothetical presentation of both the invasion through the guise of hybrid warfare. It's all within the parameters of hybrid warfare, using real units, real equipment, real capabilities of both sides, and also and the real doctrines within the doctrine of hybrid warfare, where we are invaded inside and outside at the same time. That's hybrid warfare, inside and outside. There's no such thing as a front line in hybrid warfare. Oh yeah, there's battle lines where a unit is at any given moment, but there's no such thing as a front, like in Blitzkrieg, where you have a front line. No, there is no fronts in hybrid warfare, because your enemy materializes inside your country and from around it and comes in. So there are no front lines that you're safe behind. You're not safe anywhere. So you have to stay nomadic or semi-nomadic, and you constantly have to move around. People will not be wherever they began at when all of this begins. People will not be in their homes. You will be forced out of your home. You will have to live in the woods. You will have to become a nomad if you hope to survive it. You will. You will have to. You will have to. You will have to know how to evacuate. You have to know how to do that first, because you are not going to take on the Chi-Com army by your mailbox. You're not going to walk out of your house with some shotgun and take on the Red Chinese. That'll never happen. You'll get identified and wiped out quick, because they're coming at you with a combined might of artillery, rocket artillery, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, mechanized infantry and armored personnel carriers, attack helicopters, air assault troops, different types of cruise missiles from ships or from airdropped cruise missiles. They're going to be dropping carpet munitions on cities, where they fly a bomber over a city and just drop munitions in a straight line and just carpet munition the whole place to shit. They're going to send in their tactical fighter bombers to hit specific key targets or to strafe and fire rockets or whatever they want them to do, or air-to-ground missiles, they're going to use that. They could even re-equip their fighter aircraft for ground attack missions because they can put a couple different types of airdrop munitions onto them too, or air-to-ground missiles. So what I'm saying is that you're not in the actual invasion phase itself, like in my stories I wrote, you are not going to take on the Red Chinese when they're coming into your towns and cities. You need to get out of the hot zone. You need to go somewhere safe as a nomad, and you need to wait. You need to bide your time, and you wait for the phase of the invasion to end, and then when it's in the occupation, only then do you even have a realistic opportunity to even really do anything effective. And even then, you're still going to get a lot of people wiped out because that's just the nature of war. Lots of people die in war. And the attrition rate of a professional army versus like some sort of a guerrilla force or a partisan element, the attrition rate is horrible for the partisans. I mean, look at Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, all the partisan elements that fought against us, the attrition rate was horrible. A lot of them died for a lot less of us. It'd be the same here. It'd be the same here. Oh yeah. I mean, if you had an effective type of a guerrilla force, oh yeah, they can do some damage. I'm not saying that they can't, but what I'm saying is that they're not in a position or properly equipped to take on a professional fighting force that's trained and effective and fights as a team, a combined arms team. You're not going to take on a combined arms team and be as effective as they are. We're not going to have no Air Force. We're not going to have no real types of artillery. All of that stuff at the very beginning, we're not going to have none of it because it's all going to be destroyed on our end of things. And partisans over time acquire gear and weapons over time. They don't start off on a good footing. Now, they have to go after like softer types of targets to acquire better weaponry as time goes on. That's just the nature of those types of wars. When it's like a war of occupation and you're fighting back against an occupying power, it takes time. It takes time and a lot of dedication to get to a position where you're even able to be remotely effective against a occupying force. It's not something that you're just going to do off the bat. You're not going to repel an invasion by a determined, very powerful superpower like China, or along with like another major power like Russia, who are both coming at you. You're not going to be able to beat them, head on. You're just not. You're going to have to wait for them to get into their occupation mode where they're consolidating their gains and starting to like build FOBs or whatever, or they're in there more of like a policing type of a stand where they start doing patrols and things like that. That is when you might have an opportunity to actually do something. You're not going to do it when they're coming in with full firepower, attacking this country and wiping everything out that exposes itself. That's why all the reactionary people in my scenarios got killed right off the bat. They got killed because they reacted and they ran out. They had no actionable intel. They didn't have anti-tank weapons. They didn't have air-to-ground weapons. They had nothing. They just had small arms, and they ran out and they got annihilated. That's just the nature of that type of warfare. So that people that have these like video game fantasies, like they're going to be like, some kind of Call of Duty character. Nah. It don't work like that. Real warfare does not work like a video game or like a movie. There's no movie and no video game that can do real warfare any sort of justice. There's no rendition of it that does any sort of justice to the real thing. Because there's nothing that mimics the real thing like actually being in the midst of it does. So people are going to find that out. I can only do so much with my presentations, but I hope, sure, I don't have all the sound effects. I don't have all the, moving pictures of it. I don't have all that in my documentaries, but what I do have is I have my experience to draw on to where I can also go and make pictures of certain things occurring that would be commonplace in such types of events. That's all, that's what I can do. That's all I can do. It's the best I can do. And I hope people learn from it. I hope people read those stories. If people are really serious about wanting to know what it'll look like, go and read those stories, for God's sake. The ones I wrote in the community tab. Read those. Sure, there's a lot of misspelled words or other types of words, but I did that on purpose so that the algos would leave them up, because they've took a lot of my parts that I would post down because of how I spelled certain things. So please, please go read those if you've not read those. There's one really, really short one. It's only like literally like 2 posts, 2 parts. It's called End of War Spec Ops Missions, or Late War Spec Ops Missions. Then there's the split up the middle one where it takes place as the invaders are the main characters, and it shows their side of things. And then there's the story before it, which shows what a major urban area would look like during the initial invasion and a little bit into the occupation. It's the story. It's the second invasion story about Phoenix, Arizona. Then there's the first one, and my longest one and most drawn out one, which was my original one was probably I don't know, some people say it was the best. I think the second one was pretty damn good too. I mean, really, they were all good. I mean, the third one's just a different tempo because it's the invaders and they're coming in, at full force. But the second one was pretty good from the urban standpoint, because I think a lot of people don't realize all the types of things that would happen in some under those types of conditions, like how things would develop and how they would move along, and what types of threats are in an urban environment versus the types of threats that are in commonly in like a rural environment. And that's why I made those community tab review videos that are in that playlist, the community tab story review playlist, where I in later videos in that story review playlist, I actually take excerpts from different stories and I relate them to what the specific topic is for that particular video, be it tactics or sanitation or whatever. There's all sorts of really good gems of information in there. I mean, gems, gold. It's gold. I mean, if you want to learn how to survive the situations, that is a great playlist too. If you want to know what the ebb and flow of the battles look like, then I suggest you watch my whole it's a 36 video long documentary. It's 36 videos. It's called 96-Hour Invasion, which shows that a 4-day invasion of hybrid warfare. It's a best case scenario for us, but we still lose badly in 4 days. But it's our best case scenario where we lose in 4 days, but we didn't have some sort of a internal conflict before it that bled us completely dry. So the one that goes with that is a Pacific Northwest playlist, which is even shorter. It's only 10 videos, but that's very good. That goes more into like how terrain affects certain things, like mountains, and like they show some mountain battles and how that looked. When I do my audiobook, and that's coming next, that is coming next. When I do my audiobook, I'm going to feature a character that is in those mountains during the time of that invasion, whether in their mountain battles. So that's going to be a character in my story. So yes, if anybody has any questions for me, I'm going to take some time to interact now before my battery dies. I'm going to have to get going soon. Oh yeah, I've been going a while anyway, but now a good hour and a half. Anybody want to ask anything before I get off? Anybody have anything they want to say? Any burning questions, burning comments? Say something. I'm listening. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just out to help people, man. I'm not out here for nothing. I'm all about my business. I'm just out here to help people. I'm for nothing but that. I'm all about my business. All about my business here. No time for games. I'm all about my business here. I want people to learn as much as they can about these things, because this is very, very serious. Very serious. I don't want to see nobody caught off guard by any of it. I want people to understand how real all of this stuff truly is, and how the woke military is not going to be there to protect you. And I've said a lot about them already earlier in this stream, like I intended to, and also about China. I wove it all together into another good live. Yeah, thank you, Lotus. Thank you, man. Hey, I'm great. I'm glad to see you, Lotus. I know you've been there, done that, like I have. Anybody have anything they want to say? Sorry, I got to push buttons to see these. Yeah, yeah, I have some really, really good subscribers here. Really good subscribers. They know what's up. They know how real all this really is, and how serious it is. Our future is not a bright one. Our future is not some sort of a sci-fi future. Maybe in the East, like China and Russia, but America, it's going to be like the Flintstones here. There ain't going to be no fourth industrial revolution or any of that garbage or any of that AI crap here. It's all going to get destroyed when we get invaded by Russia and China, or probably even before that when we have some sort of internal conflict. None of that shit's going to happen here. This place is gonna be annihilated by our foreign enemies. So they're a little great reset, fourth industrial revolution. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, keep dreaming. Oh, they have big dreams, but they're never gonna happen. Let me see. Yeah, the dreams of China and Russia are going to happen, though. China's going to invade and colonize this place, and Russia's going to get their Arctic Circle parts of North America, colonize that part, get their resources. Kathy. Okay, baby, I will. Hold on. What about Alaska? Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying, Kathy. The Russians are gonna get Alaska and northern Canada. They want to rule basically the whole Arctic Circle with all of its resources. They want to be a commodity and resource superpower. Russia does, and they will. They'll get Alaska back like they've wanted, and northern Canada. I'm sure the Russians will just annex the people there too. Like I don't think they're going to treat them quite like how China's going to treat us down here, but up in Alaska and northern Canada, I think the Russians are just going to make them Russian citizens and make them learn Russian and all that. I'm basically positive about that at this point. Russia's a lot more civil than China as far as like how they treat other human beings. They're still not the best, but you know what I'm saying. They're not like genocidal and bent on all that shit. Yeah, they have admitted so, Kathy. That all the stuff I cover it based on their admissions and their actual plans that they've already admitted to. Everything I say about the invasion, I base completely off of their own words and off of their actions. And their actions speak even louder than their words because their actions back their words up a whole bunch of times. Yeah, well, TNT, you can do the best you can do. That's all you can do. I mean, I'm just trying to give good, solid, sound, information as far as how to, try to survive it. But of course, you're free to make your own choices. We all have free will. Everybody in this chat has free will. People can give sound advice, but you can only do what you can do or what you want to do. You can give all the sound advice in the world, but it's up to people if they want to either listen to some of it, all of it, or whatever. I mean, you're free to do whatever you got to do, and that's fine. Hey, everybody's gonna have their own ways about them that they do, and hey, you're free to do that. You're free to do that. I'm not knocking you for it. I sure ain't. No, you're free to do what you're gonna do. Well, TNT, that I'm not. No, I mean, I'm just saying in Scripture, you're able to defend yourself. That's the realities of Scripture. You're not going to chase them off with Scripture. That's not. Sorry, it hasn't worked ever in the past. It's not going to work. I mean, unless you're dealing with like spiritual entities it'll work against. But people, though, people have free will, and Chinese troops have the free will to go after people, and they're now God can do other things, like he can hide you, like God shows how he works in the Bible, because God works through the natural. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything against God. I mean, God's all powerful, but what I'm saying is God chooses to work through the natural, and that's a theme through the Bible. Whether the natural is your rifle and he guides your shots to hit the target, like he guided the arrows and the stone of David's sling, or whether he hides you from them, he can do that. He can supernaturally hide you. But you're not going to like run out there and like yell scripture verses and they run away. It don't work like that because they have free will too. You have to understand that. People have the free will to either be bad people or to be good people, generally speaking. They have that choice, TNT, and the Chinese are consciously making evil choices to do evil to other people. And the only way you can stop it is the way David stopped Goliath. You have to respond with self-defense. That's the best way to deal with evil aggressors, is self-defense, because it's all throughout the Bible. And according to the scriptures, you have a biblical duty or right to defend yourself. I'm glad you said that, though, TNT. I mean, you brought up a good point. I think people have to remember that other people have free will, whether that's bad people or good people. I mean, you can do things. God can guide your rounds to hit the target for sure, or whatever you do. Yeah, well, TNT, that's self-defense. They'll fall by the sword before you. Yeah, yeah, and you can do that, TNT. God can guide all your rounds to hit those targets when you're defending yourself. And you know what? He can cause those 5,000 to fall before the sword. I've had a dream. I'm just going to go ahead and share, TNT, now that you bring it up before the phone dies. I had dreams of fighting Chinese and Russian troops in the woods. I started to talk about it a long time ago, 2 years ago, in my other video I made, but I had a dream where I actually had the defense tools that I had now, and I basically wiped out a whole platoon of foreign troops before they ended up getting me. And you know what? That's one man against 40. That's one man against 40. So if that dream is any indication, then you know what? That is scripture coming true. Because if one man takes on 40 successfully, then that's God guiding every single round or every single whatever you're using against your enemies. Like how he guided the stones that from David's sling to hit Goliath, or how he guided the farming tool that Shammah used in the lentil field to take out all those Philistine aggressors. It was 600 he killed with a farming tool in a lentil field. So you know what? If God can make a person that powerful in self-defense, then you're absolutely right, TNT. I'm with you on that. I'm not against you. I'm with you. I'm just saying that God works through the natural. That's a theme throughout the Bible. And that's all I do on this channel, is show people how God works through the natural and how you can, because we're equally yoked. We're equally yoked to the physical and the spiritual. But a lot of people forget that. And they forget that God put us in a physical world, and we have to do physical things. We can't expect God to do everything. We have to do some things too, and God will meet us halfway, because that's a theme throughout the whole Bible. Like how Noah built the ark, and God shut it for him. God met him halfway. Joseph stored the grain. God made that grain stretch through that whole famine. You see what I'm saying, right? Everybody understand what I mean? That's the power of God. And God works through people too. Yep. Yes, TNT. I'm with you. We're with each other. We're all on the same page. That's all I was getting at, was that God works through people, whether they're defending themselves or prepping or building. Hey, I can preach sometimes. I know my Bible. I know the Holy Spirit has told me some of the things about the Bible that that I understand them in their proper context. I know. I know how it works. I think we're all on the same page here. And, I think that that's all very important for people to remember, is that we're still in a physical world and we have to meet God halfway, because we are expected with our free will to make good choices with our free will and to do the right things, and God will meet us halfway. As long as we defend ourselves, we prep, we still pray, pray unceasingly, of course, but there's certain physical things you have to do too, of course. So it's both physical and a spiritual thing. It's never all one or never all the other. You have to be well-rounded. You have to be well-rounded and well-grounded. Sounds like a catchphrase. I could start saying well-rounded, well-grounded. as it pertains to physical and spiritual. As long as we're in this physical world together, we all have to do physical things and spiritual things, both. But once we're in the spiritual, we never have to worry about none of this physical garbage ever again. Ever again. So, let's see, who else has anything to say here? How many aircraft carriers, Jeffrey? Well, China has 4 officially, but they're waiting on their 4th one to be complete by very, very small electronic installations like computers, like targeting computers, radars, electronic weapon systems, things like that. Really like ancillary, things that don't, just, it's basically for all intents and purposes complete. It's sitting there in the dry dock ready to be released as soon as the other stuff is put on it. It's another super carrier like the one they just built. Their other 2 carriers, though they're pretty big, they're not like super carriers. They can't carry all these aircraft under the deck and everything like their newest one. They're still pretty big though. They can carry like, I think it's close to like 30 aircraft on deck, maybe 36, like 3 whole squadrons. But their newest super carrier is huge, and I think the 4th one that's about to be complete, that's also a super carrier, if I'm not mistaken. China's humongous. I mean, but aircraft carriers are obsolete anyway because of the types of missiles China and Russia have. And submarines have shown that they can defeat an entire carrier group, like the French Saphir sub in that exercise that sank a whole entire American carrier group single-handedly. So the Chinese, they have subs, they have missiles, they have everything they need to defeat our entire Navy. I mean, that's why our Navy, in a time of war, cannot safely sail within like 1,500 nautical miles of China, or they're going to be sunk. So, by the DF-26Bs and the DF-21Ds, if they get in a little closer, China has those carrier killer missiles. They also have hypersonic missiles that can sink ships. They have shore-based, anti-ship missiles. They have a whole bunch of different weapons, a whole bunch. So does Russia too, really. I mean, Russia could use a Kinzhal to sink a carrier. They've already threatened a British carrier with a Kinzhal. That was before the whole Ukraine thing even began. So, you know what? There's ways that aircraft carriers have become obsolete for power projection. But what the Chinese use their aircraft carriers for, they have a different doctrine than we do. They don't use theirs as much for power projection as they do to like push their air defenses out a little bit further from the coast, if that makes sense. Like instead of flying planes from the Chinese mainland, they can push their carriers out to provide an umbrella of early interception and air defense further from their shores. That's how they use theirs. They use theirs for like defense more than they do for power projection. We use ours for power projection. We sail them all around the world, and they're neat little carrier groups, and they don't do that. They keep it mostly close to the mainland. But my phone's about to die, you all. I'm gonna have to get going. I love you guys. Y'all have a blessed night. Thank you for coming. Hey, thank you, MB. I appreciate you, brother, for that, for the blessings. Hey, Brandy. How bad will the state parks be overran and traversed? Well, I mean, eventually they'll get to them. They will, the Chinese and Russians, but that's not going to be like the first places they go for. Like that might be like a tertiary place unless they have troops in a specific like wilderness area, which is possible, and they do in some places, but it just depends which park, depends how close it is to anything important, like power plants or installations or big cities. It all depends, Brandy, really. It's all about strategy. If you would love my documentary series where I show a lot of how that works. You could get a good idea from it, really, if you watch those. You could see where they come from, where they materialize, and what it's nearby, like what it's close to, and what they go after. And I'm glad you came, Brandy. Thank you. Let's see. Maybe one more. Maybe. I got 5%. No, I can't do one more. Anyway, thank you, you all. I hope I. Oh, yeah, Heather, uncircumcised Philistines. Well, Shema, he bested 600 of them with a simple farming tool in self-defense. Praise God. See, that's what self-defense is all about. It's standing against evil. All right, y'all be blessed. I got to get going.